Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Sapna Rise. I'm Natasha and we have someone very special with us today. We have Stuti Gupta. Oh wow. Hi
Hi,
Stuti.
Natasha.
Introducing you and you join.
I'm sorry, your voice was cracking a little.
I said I was just introducing you and you joined.
Oh, I joined in at the very right time then. Let me hear
Perfect
what
time.
you were saying about me.
So, in fact, I was just telling the viewers about, who the guest is. And to everyone who've tuned in, welcome to another episode of Sapna Rise. This is a very special episode because we were supposed to have it earlier, but due to a technical difficulty, we rescheduled it. So here we are. We have Stuti Gupta with us. So Stuti has been a storyteller since I think from her childhood. She's been into storytelling and reading books, and she's penned three beautiful books on Indian mythology for children, on fables, and on stories for kids. So, Stuti, welcome to Sapna Rise.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I can't tell you how thrilled I am when the event got rescheduled the last time. I was so heartbroken and I couldn't wait for this day enough. I am really, really happy and thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, I think I'm excited today because I've personally read the book and I know how, it transported me back to childhood, tales that my grandmother used to tell me, tales that my mother used to tell me. And these stories are actually so close to your heart because you can read them at any given point in life and feel so happy.
Oh, so true. Most of the people who read it have got back saying that not just kids, but adults and people of all ages have enjoyed this book just as much. And it's such a joy to know that you enjoyed reading it too. And you could relive
Absolutely.
your childhood a little because of the book.
Quickly introducing everyone to the book. We're talking about magical mythologies, and these are fascinating stories of epic characters. This is a new book that Stuti has penned. And Stuti, would you like to tell us a little about the book, in case somebody doesn't know?
Sure. This book is called Magical Mythology. It has 23 short stories about gods, goddesses, and characters from the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Um, These stories are not the usual that you've heard. It's a mix of some unheard, unknown, unique stories and some very common known stories. So I think the thrill of reading something new is comes and joins hands with something that you've been hearing for all along. And this was written in mind thinking that this is going to be for kids. But when I finished writing it, I realized that I had loved writing it so much. I was pretty sure that even adults were going to enjoy it. And this book is beautifully illustrated also. Every story
Yeah.
has a small illustration to go with it, and small lessons and puzzles and coloring pages. So I thought this was like this magic pot that a child or an adult could get and enjoy it thoroughly from the first page to the last.
Absolutely. I think the best part about the book is, it actually takes you back to your childhood. It's basically a pathway to retrace your steps, go back in time. There's a lot of nostalgia here. Obviously, one thing that I really have to point out is you bring back Indian mythology in today's times of gadgets and mobile phones and tablets and games, that the kids are surrounded with. So this is something fresh where they're reading light at the same time you're tracing them back to our roots.
Thank you. It thrills me to know that that message goes across because that's a very personal learning that I have taken from my own child and narrating stories to the children around me in the family. I realized that there are a lot of slippers and magic wands and cottages and all those fairies, but we don't know too much about the Indian side of fairy tales or mythological stories. And there was a point when I remember people used to tell me, आप अपने बच्चों को इस type की story सुनाते हो, they are going to lag behind, they are not going to be competitive with the other kids. And I used to be like, those other stories have nothing for you to take away. These stories are like entertaining, educational, and if you're really dealing with a child or even an adult जिसको concentration में problem होती है, these stories I think can bring back that lost touch with our concentration spans also.
We grew up reading and listening to these stories, and I think we turned out fine.
Pretty fine, yes. I think we are doing pretty well.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think Panchatantras have been the basis of my childhood because those are the stories that I continuously listen to from my mom. And the best part
Yes.
of these stories is they come with a meaning.
Yes. And you're not driving home the meaning with a hammer in
Yeah.
your hand. You're subtly telling them that this is how it works. So let's say Panchatantra uses animal imagery more often. Children love animals. So if you tell them that the rabbit was smart enough to outdo a lion, they will learn that even if you're small, you can go and defeat someone who's far stronger or bigger. You don't need to drive home that point. They'll learn it on their own. That's the beauty of it.
So, Stuti, tell me, how did this book come to happen? How did this idea of 23 short stories, 8 characters, and these are loved characters. So, how did this thought come to you?
I think a lot of things got mixed up. The starting happened way back, I think, in about 2008 and 9 when I was working on an encyclopedia of Hinduism. I am an editor by profession, you know that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll tell the viewers also that I've been an editor for almost 14 years now. So I was editing an encyclopedia of Hinduism and I used to read these stories there. Then when I did my MPhil thesis, I read Ramayana, like 7 different Ramayans, because my focus was on the character of Ravan. And I was fascinated. I think the way I looked at Ravan changed completely after I finished my MPhil. Now, if somebody comes and tells me Dashera hai, Ravan jalane, I'd be like, please, mat jalao. He was not such a bad guy. So then
Yeah.
I thought that maybe there is another side to it, and we need to give it a voice. I think it finally took a form when my son uh, got hooked to these stories. He used to demand a story at every mealtime when he slept. He needs a new story every day. So I think that's how I came up with this concept that the other parents maybe who are struggling to get their children's attention towards books or mythology or Indian stories, they could really help this. So that's how we crystallized this idea into a book.
Wow. I mean,
Originally, we planned to have a lot many characters, but I think there were so many stories we had to really fight to कि कौन सा include करें, कौन सा रहने दें, because that's always a battle. मुझे तो सब अच्छी लग रही थी, I loved everything, and then I had to put a stop because we had to think of other factors also. But I think this collection for me is like the perfect combination for the stories that I could put together.
absolutely. Having read the book myself, I know how it's so beautiful because each of these stories, you've actually done a character sketch in the beginning or an introduction to each chapter or each story that you've narrated. So, when a kid is reading it, he or she's not clueless that what am I reading? And you've tied it back to these different common stories that we've all heard of, like Ganesh ji takes the productionas of his parents, that whole story. Why modaks? Like, why is a modak used during Ganesh Chaturthi? It's simple things like these. You actually talked about them in the chapters. So not only is this a storytelling process, but it's also informative.
Yes, it is. I mean, a lot of things that we think are not making sense, they suddenly start falling together like pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah. Absolutely. Most of these, at the end of each chapter, you have certain activities. So would you like to take us through that process and how did you incorporate such a smart thing? Because when a child is reading, at the end of it, there's some activity for her or him to do.
I have used this device in my previous book also. It's called
Okay.
Popular Indian Fairy Tales. So every story was broken down into sections, and after every section, there was a set of questions. For instance, there's a woodcutter, and he's standing in the forest, and some fairies ask him that if you stay with us for a year, we are going to give you all riches. So now he's at a point where he has to choose to go back to his family, where there are little kids who will never know where he went, or he can choose to stay with the fairies. So before he takes the decision, I put in a questionnaire where I asked, what do you think he should do? So maybe you don't have the right answer. There is no right or wrong answer to it, but it will make you think. And the whole point of developing a child's intellect, I think, is to make them think. They're smart enough to outdo all of us together. So when you make them think, they can do wonders. So I do this with my son also. I tell him a story and then I ask him something out of it. So I want you to give that same kind of feeling to the readers also, because for me as a storyteller, no story is complete without connecting on the basis of the story. The story becomes a medium for propagating, let's say, a deeper idea. So these activities helped memory retention. I don't know if you remember that there's a crossword.
Yeah.
So when you read the hint and you want to put in, you will remember that one fact for quite a while. It's like revision happening without you knowing that it's actually
Yeah.
revision in your head.
Wow, I think that's a very divisive and a smart way of recollecting things that the child has learned actually.
I think anything that is visually graphic and attractive, kids will somehow store it in their visual memory and then they will remember it from there.
That's very smart, Stuti. And most importantly, at each chapter, towards the end, you've actually given like a small lesson. And those lessons are not coming from the characters. It's something that you've generally written as a takeaway from the story.
I think all storytellers have this habit ना थोड़ा ज्ञान तो बांटना पड़ता है. Otherwise, they start feeling incomplete. कि, oh, कुछ रह गया है. And since this was conceptualized for children, my motive was to not keep it preachy at all. For instance, there's one chapter where it says your parents will do anything for you.
Yeah.
That is a feeling that kids understand after a really long time in life, you and I included, I guess. We take it for granted. But when you read something like that, you're bound to think about it a little. So I think these were those small things that I wanted to make them think about, that I
Wow.
practically face with my kid and kids around me.
Stuti, there's a beautiful comment as we speak. It's by Snashwin Karthik. He says, "Hi Stuti, can we expect an Indian J.K. Rowling from you?"
Hi, Ashwin. It's so good to have you here. Ashwin is a fellow author also, and
Okay.
J.K. Rowling is creating a fictional world. I am bringing an already existent world out to those who don't know about it. That's the only difference. The thing is that my magic works in bringing it forward and not creating it as such.
Wow. Stuti, do you think Indian mythology has been a subject or a genre that's not been given it's not as read as it used to be earlier? In today's times, do you feel like it's fading away a little bit given the modernization and how, kids have access to so many things right now?
I think there are two sides to this coin. One is that with the coming of nuclear families more and more, those lessons learned from grandparents are kind of reducing and taking a back foot. Your grandparents would rather do a video call and check with you and see how you're growing rather than telling you stories online.
Yeah.
So that is the practical aspect of how we're lagging there. But there is a flip side where a lot of publishers and individuals have taken it upon themselves to revive this culture. So I've also seen comics and graphic novels on mythological characters. There's an entire graphic novel called Ravanayan, which is almost, I think, 5-6 years ago it was released, and it was a straight off hit because when you see something so graphically and you're reading about it, it obviously is more interesting. So and Mr. Devdutt Patnaik's books, they
Yeah.
broke the jinx around mythology that it's not making sense. It's all in the past. Let's forget about it. So I think you making the contemporary need of it felt was the key, and a lot of people are trying their hand to do it. So we're kind of working and making a balance. I think we'll end up making it heavier on the mythology side in a few years.
Hopefully, I think one thing that I want to definitely ask you is you talked about 8 different characters, and these are like the most favorite of our Indian mythology from our Indian mythology. So, who is your favorite character personally, and which is a chapter that you enjoyed writing personally?
I'll tell you, it's very difficult to pick a favorite character because uh, we've grown up hearing and watching Ramayana on TV or, Sri Krishna and all. So I think all the characters are just as lovable. in the book we've also taken episodes from their childhood
Yeah.
and adulthood. So it's a very mixed bag of cute stories of all of them. But I think one where I resonate the most with is where Baby Ram wants the moon. And
Right.
because it happens with kids all the time, they'll ask you for the most difficult of things and they expect you to magically do it. So there's this one instance where Baby Ram is staring at the moon. It's a full moon night, and Mother Kaushalya goes to him and says, "Why are you so sad today?" And he says, "I want a new toy." So she said, "That's not a problem. I'll ask the toy maker to carve you a horse out of wood." So he says, "No, I don't want a horse. What do you want?" "I want the moon." "She's in a fix. How can I get you the moon?" She says, "No, that's not possible." But then he says, "I won't eat if you don't get me the moon." So then she thinks of something. Like all mothers, she comes with a plan, and she gets a vessel full of water and places it at an angle where Ram can see the reflection of the moon in the water. So he starts splashing in the water and thinks that he's actually playing with it, and his mood also lifts up. So because I have to employ such tricks by the dozens every day with my own child, I think that resonated a lot with me. And one consistent feedback that I got for that particular story was that this illustration
Yeah.
of Baby Ram and Mother Kaushalya reminded a lot of people of me and my son. He has
Wow.
big eyes like this Baby Ram in the picture. So I think that's also why I am closer to this particular story.
That's such a sweet thing.
This was actually very coincidental. When the designer sent me the initial design, I was like, yes, we'll lock it as it is. The baby looks too cute.
Yeah, I most of the illustrations on the book in the book, they're so fresh, and even as adults, you really want to go through them, sit and actually see them.
Yes, the illustrations are done by Ishan Trivedi. He's a dear friend and he's done a wonderful job. I couldn't have thanked him enough for this. The book, I think, gets half the magic because of the illustrations. It wouldn't have been the same without it.
I think all of this just ties the book together. Your illustrations, the activities, the description at this. I
Totally.
think the best part of each chapter for me personally was the small character sketch that you've given. You've actually had a diagram of each of these characters
Yes.
and given like a small character sketch. That's so smart and thoughtful.
We
Like,
initially started off, we started off with the thought that we are going to make a table. But
right.
then we thought the table is going to be so boring. So we decided to have an infographic.
Yeah.
Yes. Which could tell you what is the festival associated with the god, who are his parents or his or her parents, and these little things that you need to know. Um, when we're writing a book, I as an editor also, I my basic premise is कि किताब पढ़ने वाले को आपके सब्जेक्ट के बारे में कुछ नहीं पता. So you write it in a way that it appeals to everyone. I
Yeah.
think that's where this explanation in an interesting format came forward because we wanted to also give some bearing to the parents who were going to narrate these
Yeah.
stories to their kids.
But as I said earlier, this is something that just ties the book together in such a beautiful way because it's a wholesome experience. You're giving a character sketch, you're narrating different stories from each of the character. And at the same time, you're giving like a life lesson, you're giving at the end of it like a small activity to do. So I think this is something that a child will not forget, or it'll be like a really solid recall for him or her to actually read the whole book.
That makes me feel so happy. That makes every moment that I've spent on the book worth the experience.
Wow. Would you like to take us through the journey of writing the book? You have a small child. How was it to, pen a book in such a situation?
Since because in my job also I'm reading the entire day, it creates a lot of chaos in my mind.
Right.
Uh, in fact, when I started conceptualizing the book, the research part of it was done in a month. And
Okay.
it took me close to 2 years to put this book together because I had to write in bits and pieces. I had to wait for my son to sleep so that I could write. And some days I was just too tired to do that. And then I had to shift houses in between. A lot of other things came up. So it in total took me close to 2 years to finish this. And now that my son is a little more grown up, I'm also working on another book
Wow.
again for children, and I'm trying to bring something very core Indian into its pages. It's still getting finalized, so I'm not going to say more than that, but I'm very thrilled at the kind of feedback I'm getting for this one, so I'm sure that people are going to love that too.
Stuti, you won't believe, in fact, we actually ran a contest on our page, asking audience certain questions. So we ran like 3 stories with a question each, and we received such phenomenal response. Our DMs were flooded. The number of people who answered these questions were in hundreds, and we were surprised because we've not seen this kind of a participation before. So, we actually ran a contest and we thought we would actually give out signed copies of people who are, answering the questions correctly. So, would you like to actually give out the winner names?
I will. In fact, I was thrilled when you told me about the contest and to know that a lot of new people and God-based questions was actually very, it made me very happy. It just goes to show that people are still interested. So, out of
Right.
all of you who've answered the questions correctly, we've picked out 3 winners. Um, the first one is Bharat Gaura and goes by the handle D Bharat underscore. And then the second one is Mehul Kothari. The third one is Pratham Prathu.
Wow. Congratulations to all the winners.
Congratulations.
I think
Yes, and thank you so much for participating in great numbers. And I feel really honored and special when people do such a thing, not just because of the book or the response that the book is getting, but also because these stories are reaching out to more people.
Stuti, I think what I'd like to tell the winners is somebody from the team will reach out to them and we'll arrange for a signed copy, from your side to reach them. And that's going to be their gift.
Wonderful. It's going to be amazing. Please, when you receive your copies, or even if you're watching, do reach out to me. You can send me a message. There's my email ID inside the book, storytellerstuti at gmail. Please do reach out. It's always very, very encouraging to hear from readers.
Also, if anybody wants to pick up the copy of of this book, it's available across all Sapna Book House outlets. It's also available on sapnaonline.com. That's our e-commerce store. So you can either walk into the stores or place an order online. But I personally recommend this because if you're a child, or if you're a child, this is a must read. If you're a parent, this is something you should read to your kids. And if you're an adult, this is something that will take you back in time and bring back those grandmother's tales. So you should get this book.
And please, if you get an opportunity, do walk into a Sapna store and do that. I think that has been on my to-do list ever since the beginning of last year, and then somehow the lockdown and everything's pushed my plans. I've heard so much about, I've seen so many pictures. People tag you and they walk in and they show off, that this is such a nice store. It's like a book paradise, book lovers, really, this is heaven. And I just sit here feeling jealous that I'm not able to do that. So those of you who do have access, please do walk in and grab a copy.
That's very sweet of you, Stuti. I think we should, maybe for your next book, we'll do like an in-store session.
Oh, yes, I'd love to. I just grab the first opportunity that I get to come there.
Yeah, hopefully the situation is better at that point.
Let's hope so.
There's one comment by Watch Freak which I really want to address. He or she says, wish you could write about Ravana. In fact, there's a whole chapter about Ravan in this book, so please do read it. And then we
I
have
can write stories about Ravan. I can just go on and on writing about Ravan because I've read a lot about him in all the 7 Ramayans that I was reading since my topic of research was Ravan. But surprisingly, that will be giving you only one side of the story, and that never is a fulfilling experience for a storyteller.
right. There's another comment by Summer that says your book is of a new vision after seeing the flowchart.
Oh, yes, you have to keep up with the trends. If you give, it's like if you give very silly example that I'll give you. If you make some porridge for your child and you tell him that this is dalia, he'll be like, I don't eat dalia. If you add nuts to it and you add strawberries to it and you say this is porridge, then they'll quickly grab it.
Yeah.
So while the content is exactly the same, we're just changing the packaging a little to reach out to a wider audience.
There's another comment by Akshima. She says, Stuti, your book is an amazing read. My favorite part was Sita as the daughter of Ravana.
Thank you, Alshima.
I
A lot
think,
of people used to be taken aback
yeah.
when I said that at first, and then, they'd be like, what kind of a made up fictional story it is. But there are a lot of versions, let's say, a lot of things.
Stuti, there was one fun fact that I realized, when I was researching about you, and in fact, when we were speaking, you've done your MPhil in mythology, and you've read you've read 7 different versions of the Ramayana.
I start
That's
playing with my head at one point. One version, Ram cannot kill Ravan because Ravan is a Brahmin and Brahma Hatya cannot fall on Ram's head. So Lakshman kills Ravan. And I'm like,
okay.
this is like changing the Ramayana for me. I've always
That
heard Ram
narrative.
kills Ravan. What is this happening? This is like a South Indian version, more closer to the Jain perspective also, where you cannot go to heaven if you have Brahma Hatya on your head. And then
Okay.
there was one where Sita takes the form of Kali and kills a 1,000-headed Ravan because the 10-headed Ravan had a brother which people did not know about.
Okay.
So it is called Adbhut Ramayana. So it was really Adbhut in that sense. It just, I used to be baffled and fascinated. So that is also one of the reasons why I decided to put these stories together and bring it out.
But it must have taken so much patience to actually read 7 different versions of this book.
It took me close to 1 year doing my research of only reading and nothing else. So,
It must be
but
exciting
I
as
think it was very enjoyable. It was very enjoyable. The more I read about it, the more fascinated I became
well. Right.
because we as kids, I mean, in my case particularly, my father was always telling us stories from mythology. I think most of Kabir ke dohe and Rahim ke dohe I've learned from my father because he used to just walk around the house and tell us those. So I heard about Ravan from him. In fact, the idea that I work on Ravan's character came from my mother. So you can imagine the kind of rich environments that I was a part of growing up. So I just wanted to give that same kind of experience to a lot of other people.
But exploring the chapter which mentions Sita as the daughter of Ravana, that was something so enlightening for me. It actually fits. It actually makes sense when you think of it. It's a different perspective.
Yes. I think it is very essential in life to have a dual perspective of things. It just enables decision making in a better way.
Very true. Watch Freak has another comment for you. He says, have you covered the Buddhist version of Ramayana?
Yes, I have. I have also covered actually. When I wanted to look at the spectrum to study, I wanted to take in as many different opinions as possible. So I took one Ramayana, which is from the east of India, one from the south. One was Valmiki's Ramayana because, well, that was the original to say it. And Ramcharitmanas. Then I took the Jain Ramayana also by Vimal Suri. I also took the Buddhist Ramayana into perspective because it has to be all inclusive because these are mostly stories that are traveling from one part of India to the other, and they start getting these elements together when, suppose they reach the east, there is a Devi dominant area. So you start seeing more power resting with Sita. She can become Kali. Ram is worshipping the goddess instead of worshipping Shiv when he's getting set aside. So you get these local flavors in
Yeah.
versions. So I have actually taken all that into account.
Wow. I think that's brilliant. And I can imagine how much research and how much effort you've put in, to not only write this book, but to complete your MPhil by reading so many books.
I think people who are addicted to reading and are passionate about it love this the most. They can read as many books as they want.
That's true. We have a very sweet comment by Vipul. He says, it's a must book to keep my little monster occupied and be a good listener. The chapters are awesome and also the illustrations.
That is very sweet. I just hope a lot of other little monsters also can stay occupied with the book and the illustration. I think for the kids who can't read themselves already, the illustrations act as a big bonus.
Yeah, that's right. So, Stuti, you've actually written three books around this genre, around children, for children. Is there any particular message that you want to give out to parents or children, or is there any, reason why you're writing these books? Is there any agenda in your mind?
See, initially when I started off with it, the motive that I had in my mind was to keep my son away from gadgets. You know, he was very little, and I used to see other children glued to the television that we won't eat if you don't switch on the television. And it used to scare me so much. My son hadn't even reached that stage. He was still, an infant maybe, and I
Okay.
used to get all paranoid about it. So I think there were a couple of techniques that I started following. One was that just so he can hear the same rhymes and not, lag there, I started using a Bluetooth speaker. So the speaker was placed far off. I played the same poem. So he knew all of them, but he hadn't seen them.
Hmm.
So he knew them all by heart. So ऐसा नहीं है that if others are saying something, then he'll not be able to. And the other thing was that you have to work, I think, on the whole voice modulation thing and try to connect these stories so that they generally stay connected. One thing that I'd like to show you that I do with my son is I tell him a story and then we paint about it together. So we were reading about
Oh,
an elephant who was eating 10 bunches of bananas. So we painted this together.
oh wow.
So you know what? He thinks that the story is not just about what I'm hearing, but also what I'm going to do with Mama later. So it's giving
That's such
me
a beautiful
very,
thing.
very, that's given me very, very good quality time with my son, and he's grown very fond of my voice, so much so that at times I'm really tired and I want to sleep, and he'll be like, "Mama, आज मुझे वो वाली story दोबारा से सुना दो." And sometimes he hears that story back to back, twice, thrice, and I'm like, "Please, आज मैं नहीं सुना सकती." He's like, "मुझे आपसे ही सुनना है." So that kind of thing also happens. But that is the thrill. I at least see him getting hooked to books and stories, and that was my only motive. So I see myself succeeding there. I think fellow parents can use these tips too.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just going to ask you, that was my next question. The children read very few books these days. They're hooked on to phones and gadgets and games, and everything is so technology driven these days that you barely see a child playing outside in the hot sun. You barely see a child without a gadget, scribbling and drawing the way we used to do it. So, are there any tips for parents or for, parents who are expecting, how can they tackle this issue in the modern day?
I think my husband and I put our heads together and thought of these tricks that we could do. The first thing that we read a lot and we know for sure is that the child is not going to follow what you say, but actually what you do. So if they see you on their phone or laptop, they are going to do the same thing. They want to do the same thing. If they see you with a book, they want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, for starters, when you're in front of them, Natasha, I think you know
Yeah.
this. Every time we had to get on a call, I'd never pick it up in one go because I have no clue where my phone is sometimes, especially when I'm at home. It is a completely chaotic situation with my phone. I have no idea where it is. So I think that's the first thing that you lead by example. The second is you make stories fun. So every time I've used this hook phrase to get my son's attention that there's a new story starting. So every time I see him trying to go towards the TV or trying to say, I'd be say, "Aapko pata hai?" And he'd quickly turn towards me that she's going to tell me something that I don't know. And then he's like, "Kya, mama?" And then you can start narrating a story. You make up stories out of things that they are doing. I made up a story. My son loves potatoes, and so we created a character called Puchki who loves potatoes, and every time his mother goes and asks him, "What do you want to eat?" he'd say, "Potato, potato, potato, potato." So we started doing this on the dinner table.
Yeah.
Every time he said, "I want to eat potatoes," he'd do it like this. And then
Okay.
I tell him how other foods are more important too when you need to balance your diet and eat everything. So these small things that you see every day, you just need to rope them in and go crazy basically. There is no formula. You just need to go crazy.
But these are such smart things that you've been doing, especially the whole painting and drawing thing. I think that is something that I'm going to keep in mind. It's a beautiful thing that you've done.
Earlier, I remember our parents, my father used to tell me if you read a story, you write down the points or the dialogues that you found best. And I
Okay.
still know children in the family who maintain diaries, who write these quotes down. And now I think it's flipped. We need to take that to art.
Yeah.
Otherwise, writing gets a very monotonous and boring kind of thing, especially with the whole online classes thing, you know.
Yeah.
People want a break.
That's true. That's true. But I think with painting and with such things away from the whole technology aspect, it's I think the recall also increases, your hand-eye coordination. So many things. There's so many
Yeah.
benefits of actually reading and painting and drawing and doing all these things.
It is going to be messy. It is really going to be messy. There was this one instance where we made a caterpillar out of the egg carton box.
Oh
We
wow.
cut it, we painted it, we put matchsticks and everything. I just could manage to click a picture and he had torn it away. So, I was left so heartbroken. I shared it in my story. Let's see, we made a caterpillar. In 30 seconds, the other story was, and it's dead. Because that's the only time that it took for it. So it's going to be very messy and frustrating at times. But it's a learning process for both the kids and the parents. So the more time you spend together doing fun stuff, the better the bonding. Stories are a great way to bond. When
Right.
you're reading out stories together, they verbally pick up the stories. Sometimes
Yeah.
my son is 3, and this is personal experience. He'll open a book and it'll look like he's reading the story word by word, but he doesn't know how to read. He's never been to school till now. He's just memorized it because I was reading it like that, and he's heard
Wow.
it like say 4 or 5 times.
Wow. Are there any tips for you that you're giving out? Like, are there any tips that you can share for children to inculcate storytelling as a habit? Like, listening to stories. Most of the kids are so impatient. They don't sit, they don't listen. Or for, parents who are struggling to inculcate this habit of storytelling at night. So, is there any thing that you'd like to share in terms of storytelling, particularly?
I think the easiest way is to start with audios that are attractive. Your child
Okay.
can be comfortable with any kind of mode. Like my son says, he needs to hear it in my voice. There'd be other kids who'd be like, नहीं हमें तो ये गाने वाला ही सुनना है. So there are a lot of, but use a Bluetooth speaker, I'd say, or use a phone speaker instead of showing them the video, so that they
Yeah.
know that they're getting a story, but they're getting it in a format that's safer for them.
Wow.
So that also works like a trick. I remember there was once very old Hindi movie song picturized on Meena Kumari. So you can imagine how old that is.
Yeah.
So she's singing Chal Mere Ghode Tick Tick Tick, and there's a little kid. My son used to love that because there is such a narrative flow in the song. Suddenly she is saying, चलते चलते उसके आगे आया एक पहाड़, and my son would go कि पहाड़ आ गया तो अब क्या होगा. So maybe you can pick up these songs that are already there, older songs like लकड़ी की काठी and नानी तेरी मोरनी को मोड़ ले गए. These are catchy songs that you can pick up, or local songs that you've been hearing around the house. They act as a hook in the beginning. Then you can slowly graduate to books or narratives, reading
Uh,
out the stories. Pick up books which have interesting pictures. So while you're reading, they can see what is happening and associate what you're saying with what they're seeing. I
right.
think that really helps.
Stuti, I must compliment you. You have such a beautiful voice. While you were singing more than listening, you were listening to the lyrics. I was just
Thank
listening to your
you.
voice. A watch freak
Thank you.
agrees with
Thank
me.
you.
There's a comment that says you
Sorry?
have such a.
Yeah.
There's a comment that says you have such a soothing voice. Wish you could publish the same as audiobooks.
Thank you. In fact, the first book under my name, which is 101 Best Indian Fables, that's also available as an audiobook. It is not in my voice, but I'm sure whoever the voiceover artist is has done justice to it.
Wow.
I have been thinking of actually starting off with some videos that are storytelling videos for kids But the only hindrance is that while I keep telling people to stay away from videos, I don't want to propagate the same channel. That's the only thing that's holding me back. Um, Otherwise, hearing stories is a great, great way of learning for kids.
Yeah. In fact, there was a comment that just Mr. Vipul had posted asking us about any plans of live storytelling sessions for kids in the near future. I think that answers him.
Yeah.
And we have a
It is
comment by,
actually tricky.
yes, please.
See, Instagram is not going to be accessible to kids actually.
Yeah.
It's going to be accessible to parents. And like I said, it's the dilemma. If I want to be seen by the kid, they'll have to watch a screen. And I really feel very hesitant in doing that.
Yeah. Maybe you could do like a podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, then again, it's with a child, and if I want to write and with a job, that kind of takes a toll sometimes. But I have all these ideas in my head. It's just the execution that's taking me forever. But now that so many people are saying, I'm really going to think about it more seriously.
Yeah. I think one thing that I would definitely want to tell you is you have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My son wouldn't agree. When I get angry, he says, "You don't sound good at all, Mama, when you're angry."
That's so sweet. We have one comment by Arup. He says, I think reading habits of children is derived from their parents' actions. If kids see parents stuck to their phones, they learn the same. So kudos to you, Stuti, for creating such an interest in reading.
Thank you, Arup. You've been really helpful with the books that you've been doing.
Stuti, lastly, I really want to ask you this. You've been in the editing industry for 14 years. You've been an editor for such a long time, and then transitioning that to being a writer. Um, how did you take the big leap? Was it difficult? Or I think you're balancing the two together right now. So how has it been going for you?
Um, See, initially from the beginning of my career, I've been editing very serious books, from fiction to non-fiction.
Okay,
Mostly now, a lot of books for the adults, basically.
right.
And everybody used to ask me, when are you going to write one of your own? Because, we read so much and we are full of ideas and we know what people are reading. We get that inside edge being in the
Absolutely.
industry. But somehow I could never feel motivated to write in that genre. When I started exploring this area of writing for children, I was not just fascinated, but I couldn't stop. It was something that kept happening. And my office people have been very supportive. Arup, for starters, if it was not for Arup, I wouldn't have finished writing Magical Mythology. He literally pushed me into finishing it. I've been postponing the deadlines because, with the personal and professional, getting that balance becomes tougher. But they all made sure that I did it, and a lot of other people also in the office, at my home, my parents, my brothers, my husband more so because half the time that I was gaia with the book, then he had to take care of the child. So I think it all came together like that. The inspiration that came, my mother-in-law, for that matter, has been a teacher for nursery kids for more than 3 decades, and
Okay.
she said, "I've been dealing with children, and I think you'll do a great job if you do this." So I've been getting learning and inspiration from everybody to go ahead and do this.
Stuti, I think I must say after this session and especially after listening to you, it's been so inspiring. It's also been so enlightening to see you apply so many different things to keep your child engaged, the things you've, and especially the things you've put into the book. So it's a very thoughtful thing, your whole process of parenting. At the same time, the process of writing the book has been very, very thoughtful.
Thank you so much. Like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. This book is also, I think, just going under my name, but like I said, the anecdotes that I've heard from my father and my mother, and the puzzles, a couple of them were actually designed by my sister-in-law. So,
Okay.
it's a very big joint effort that has come together in the form of this book because we all felt so passionately about stories.
Right. I can see that, it's actually coming through in the book.
Yes, thank you.
So, Stuti, thank you so much for your time today. I think it was such an enlightening session, and I personally enjoyed it. I hope a lot of people buy the book. This is the name of the book, Magical Mythology. Please go pick it up from the nearest Sapna Book House outlet. And if you don't have access to the stores, you can definitely order it online. But please go show some love to Stuti.
Yes, please grab a copy. Natasha, I'm really happy that you had me here for this discussion. The kind of fond love that I've had for Sapna from so far off, at least it helped this much to come close to my dream of, being associated with Sapna in some way. When things get better, I'm going to definitely walk in, meet you all, and
Absolutely.
take this big step too. But in the meantime, please buy your copies from Sapna or their online portals. Get in touch with me. If you have a child and you need more help with them, especially with respect to stories, I'm always open to you and ready with some tips that you can use.
Thank you so much, Stuti. From all of us at Sapna Bookstore, we wish you all the best. And hopefully we'll
Thank you,
meet.
Natasha. Yes, I hope so too. Let's hope that happens by the time the next book is out, so that we can do something more energetic and live with the audience at the store sometime.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank,
so much for having me,
thank you. Thank you.
and thank you to all the viewers for staying here and commenting and asking such interesting questions.
Thank you, Stuti.
Thank you. Thank you.